The first time I went to a People's Temple meeting, I felt like I was home.
When Jim Jones was up on stage, the whole audience was hanging on every word he said.
But the more power he got, the darker the story got.
Jim was a power addict, always trying to think how he could control People's Temple members.
And it indicated they wanted to get out of there. So my heart sank. I thought, this is it. It's really true.
Some people see a great deal of God in my body. They see Christ in me, a hope of glory.
He said, if you see me as your friend, I'll be your friend. As you see me as your father, I'll be your father. He said, if you see me as your God, I'll be your God.
That was the beginning of what people would later call the Jonestown Massacre. On this particular day, 909 men, women, and children lost their lives in a very sad way. But there was one child, a young girl named Tracy Parks, who managed to escape with some other children. It was a day that started normally for everyone at People's Temple, but quickly turned into a nightmare. The year was 1978, a time when the world felt divided and chilly. But inside Jonestown, a different kind of chill filled the air, one that came from fear and manipulation. Jim Jones, who people once looked up to as a hero, a god for civil rights, and a hope for those without power, showed his true colors.
I am creator of the People's Temple mission, and I will have my way, or I will tear hell out of everything you've built.
He had great speaking skills and had promised his followers a perfect place, away from the world's unfairness. But what he led them into was far from a dream. It was a terrible nightmare. This is the story of that tragic day, seen through the eyes of Tracy Parks, who survived one of the most chilling events in history. We go deep into understanding human nature and the dangers of blindly following charismatic leaders. We see the bravery and the fear of those who were there. Stay with us till the end to learn how a promised paradise turned into a poison, and how a young girl's fight to live is a powerful reminder of our will to overcome the darkest times. So what exactly happened? To know everything about it, we have to go back beginning to see how it all started. It was 1966 when Gerald Parks moved to the quiet town of Redwood Valley, California with his loving family. Fearing the Cold War and the threat of a nuclear disaster, Gerald and his wife Patricia had driven all the way from Ohio with their 3 kids, Dale, Brenda, and 6-week-old baby Tracy. Now, they were not alone there. In fact, the Parks family was among the hundreds of people who followed Reverend Jones to California, hoping to find a safe place. For Gerald, Jones was like a beacon of hope, a healer, and the most sane person of the time.
I always thought he was handsome. Just watching him, I would just be mesmerized.
Some people see a great deal of God in my body. They see Christ in me, a hope of glory.
In the middle of the 1960s, Jones and his wife established the People's Temple in California. They settled outside of the town of Ukiah with approximately 100 followers, believing that this move would protect them in the event of a nuclear holocaust. In 1973, 7 years later, Jones shared his plans to build what he called a paradise city in South America. He named it the People's Temple Agricultural Project, but it would soon be known just as Jonestown. He promised it would be a land of dreams come true. But Gerald and Patricia felt differently than their daughter Tracy. She wasn't excited at all about this new promise. As Tracy's father was also a big follower of Jones, so he packed up all his family and moved to Jonestown. They went there on a small plane. As soon as the Parks family stepped off the plane, the air was so thick and hot that Tracy found it hard to breathe.
I remember landing in a little plane on the Port Kaituma airstrip that's not very far from Jonestown.
They had to board a tractor to reach the settlement, but right after arriving, the situation took a turn for the worse. The family was stripped of everything, including their passports, and Tracy was separated from her parents.
When we came up on them gates, they were standing there with guns. And at that moment, I knew I had just entered the gates of hell.
I said, I feel like I'm making the biggest mistake of my life.
In that prison-type community, children were held separate from their parents.
He told my parents right then and there, she's going to be staying in the kids' area and you guys are going to be going to your own cottage. I was devastated.
Jim Jones claimed that family bonds were selfish, but his real goal was to turn family members against each other by isolating them. Tracy's dad, Gerald, quickly realized he had made a terrible mistake. The next morning, while exploring the grounds, he bumped into his cousin. He told his cousin that he didn't like it here. Unfortunately, the influence of Jim Jones was too strong.
And she said, how do you like Jonestown? I said, I don't. That's all was said. I had to act like I was one of them, but I never give up hope. I thought somehow, we'll get out of here.
By that evening, Gerald's cousin had betrayed him. During a large gathering, Gerald was called to the front. There, in front of everyone, a security guard began to beat him severely.
So my dad was up in front of all the people. One of the security guards came over and just started wailing on my dad. And I jumped out of my chair to go up there. And I yelled, get that bee off my dad. And this person grabbed me and said, if you know what was good for you, you would sit out.
Despite the violence, pretending everything was fine became a daily struggle, especially for young Tracy. She quickly learned that Jones made his followers work incredibly long hours. Their day began at 6 a.m. with guards shouting to wake everyone up. Tracy would jump out of bed and run to the breakfast table. After eating, she had to rush to her assigned post, where she would work until darkness fell. At night, attendance at the mandatory meetings was required, where Jim Jones would scream and preach for hours, often spreading fear about imaginary threats lurking in the jungle.
I got a hell of a lot of weapons to fight. I got my claws, I got compasses, I got guns, I got dynamite, I got a hell of a lot to fight. I'll fight.
Now, Jonestown was pretty much separated from the rest of the world. No one in the outside world knows what is actually happening here. Then, a shocking twist came on August 1st, 1977, when an article was published in New West magazine. It criticizes the People's Temple, revealing allegations of abuse. Despite this, the flow of followers to the so-called Paradise City continued, with families leaving behind worried relatives. For months, no word came from the Parks family, stirring concern among their loved ones. Fast forward to November 17, 1978, when Senator Leo Ryan from California decided to see things for himself. He flew to Guyana with his legal aid and an NBC camera crew to investigate the true state of Jonestown.
The first thing we have to do is to get in touch with Jonestown.
Congressman Ryan had this uncanny ability to look beneath. And he listened to these defectors. Many of them were interviewed, and it became very apparent to him that there was something wrong.
I'm trying to find out what the facts are as an absolutely non-committed person.
So he decided that he wanted to do a congressional delegation trip to Guyana and visit the People's Temple there.
Their entire journey, aiming to uncover the truth behind the idyllic facade, was captured on a videotape. These very images, later found abandoned on a Guyanese airstrip, would tell a chilling tale.
I'm from the United States government. We're here to inquire into the health and the welfare of American citizens who are here.
Now, upon arriving, Senator Ryan encountered a scene that looked almost too good to be true. He was greeted by cheerful children playing, adults in colorful clothing dancing and singing joyfully. The community seemed vibrant, full of life, and strangely prosperous. They had rice, black-eyed peas, and more, stored in various containers around the place. At first glance, Jonestown appeared to be a thriving community, a remarkable achievement in the middle of the Guyanese jungle.
I'm very very glad to be here. This is a congressional inquiry. I think that all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here. But I can tell you right now that whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
And the place just exploded in applause. Not rehearsed, has been printed many, many times. It was loud. My brother told me afterwards that it was the loudest they'd ever heard Jonestown.
Visitors were shown how residents happily went about their daily tasks, even organizing a scouting mission to gather barrels and leaves, a normal activity that seemed to reinforce the community's self-sufficiency. The residents themselves expressed contentment, claiming they loved their life in Jonestown.
Can you go like this? Make a choo-choo train. Make a choo-choo train.
Virtually every person we talked to said the same thing. I love it here. I never want to go home.
You're happy here?
I'm very happy here. It's the best place I've ever been.
You want to stay?
Definitely. I certainly do.
However, beneath the surface, a different reality simmered. Despite the apparent happiness, a sense of unease hung in the air, a subtle hint that not everything was as it seemed.
Some people have said they couldn't leave if they wanted to. Do you think you could?
Yeah, if I really wanted to, I'm free to go. If I was really wanted to, I'd be able to free to go.
Whispers among the people suggested that leaving Jonestown was not an option, even if one wanted to. This troubling thought hung heavy over the visitors. As evening approached, the townsfolk prepared a celebration for the visiting senator, presenting an image of a lovely community. Yet, during this cheerful event, a journalist received a secret note from one of the residents. It read, "Help us get out of Jonestown." This note was a desperate plea for freedom, starkly contrasting with the festive atmosphere.
I tucked a note in his elbow as he walked by, and the note dropped to the ground, and I picked it up and gave it back to him and told him, "You've dropped something." And a small boy then shouted, "He passed a note, he passed a note."
When I heard that, I think Vern Gosling had passed a note that he wanted to leave, we were just like, oh my God.
During a speech, the reality of their situation struck Tracy profoundly. If Senator Ryan could be deceived by the facade, who would believe the truth and rescue them? The next morning, on November 18th, Gerald and his mother Edith decided they could no longer hide the truth. They approached Senator Ryan directly, intending to reveal the grim reality of Jonestown. Edith Parks confronted Senator Ryan with a startling declaration. "We're being held prisoner here." Shocked, the senator turned to Gerald, seeking confirmation.
And Edith Parks walked up to Jackie Spear and said, "I'm being held prisoner here. I want to go home."
What is your wish today? To go back home. And where's home? U.S.
The unfolding drama revealed the deep layers of deception crafted by Jim Jones, even as the community put on a facade of normalcy and happiness. After the unsettling visit from Senator Ryan, the tension in Jonestown grew even heavier, making it clear that the dark side of this community was far worse than anyone outside could imagine.
Last night, someone came and passed me this note.
That's who we're talking about. He wants to leave his son here. If Jonestown's such a bad place, why does he want to leave his son here?
But let's rewind a bit to understand how things reached this point, focusing on Tracy, whose entire life was entwined with the People's Temple from her early days in Redwood Valley. Tracy, born into the fold of the People's Temple, grew up with Jim Jones as a towering figure in her life. She was taught from the start that Jones was a man anointed by God. This belief was reinforced through staged miracles that were meant to dazzle the followers. One vivid memory for Tracy was during a large gathering where Jones called on a woman in a wheelchair to stand and walk towards him. The crowd erupted in emotional applause as the woman, struggling at first, managed to stand and then walk. What Tracy, nor the rest of the congregation didn't know was that this man was one of Jones' secretaries, hired to play this part in the charade. As part of his control, Jones regularly held meetings he called catharsis. These gatherings were far from healing. They were trials by fire. Members, children included, could be singled out to come to the front and be hit with a paddle. The rest of the congregation would be forced to watch and laugh, turning these sessions into spectacles of humiliation under the guise of purging evil. Then there were the White Nights, the most dreaded of all Jones' manipulations. These events were terrifying drills where Jones tested his followers' loyalty by making them drink a fruit punch that might be poisoned.
Who in the hell wouldn't be ready for a white night? How do you feel about you may die tonight?
While everyone nervously sipped the liquid, fearing for their lives, Gerald, Tracy's father, understood the grim reality.
I knew those white nights he was having was fake at the time, but I also knew that one day one of them would not be fake.
These were not just loyalty tests. They were rehearsals for something unimaginable. Since 1976, Jones has been buying cyanide, planning what Gerald feared would be a mass tragedy. The sense of urgency to protect his family grew, but escape seemed like a fantasy. Jones had made sure to instill a deep-seated fear of the surrounding environment in his followers. He painted the Guyana forest as a deadly labyrinth, echoing with threats of dangerous wildlife and impossible terrain, making everyone believe that leaving Jonestown was a suicidal venture. In the midst of this, the ordinary days in Jonestown were a bizarre mix of communal living and intense psychological control. Each morning began with a stern routine, and every night ended under the spell of Jones' domineering speeches.
I want to give you more than I have. I want you to be greater than I am. And if you don't want to go this route, then go to hell where you want to, but don't bother me. I am creator of the People's Temple mission, and I will have my way, or I will tear hell out of everything you've built.
As fear and manipulation became the norm, the community's fabric began to unravel. Trust eroded, and paranoia took root as the reality of their entrapment under Jim Jones's rule became clearer each day. For Tracy and her family, each passing moment was a mix of hope for escape and the dread of being caught in the web woven by Jim Jones, a web that seemed inescapable as the days in Jonestown wore on. So after the Parks family courageously spoke up to Senator Ryan, revealing that they were being held captive, their brave declaration set off a chain of events. Many other families began to come forward too. Soon, over a dozen temple members joined the Parks family, declaring their desire to leave Jonestown. Jim Jones confronted Gerald and his family about their intentions, but despite his shock, he managed to keep a surprisingly calm demeanor, not causing a scene at the moment.
You can feel death in the air. You can actually feel it.
Senator Ryan, believing he could safely get these people home, began organizing their departure. However, confidence was low among the others, and the tension was palpable. As the defectors gathered their belongings and loaded them onto a tractor that would take them to freedom, an uneasy silence hung over the group. The journey to the airport was fraught with anxiety. The road, stretching 6 miles, was in terrible condition.
My wife was on the truck. Our eyes met, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and neither one of us said anything.
And everyone's faces were etched with worry, yet no one spoke a word. Upon arriving at the Port Kaituma airstrip, the scene was one of hurried preparation. A total of 33 people were there, ready to board 2 planes. The Parks family was split between them. The camera captured every tense moment, rolling as Gerald Parks led his family towards one of the planes. But then a disturbing development unfolded. A truck rumbled down the dirt road, arriving behind them. It was loaded with armed men. They were Jones men who had followed them to the airport. Without warning, the gunmen opened fire on the group. Tragically, Patricia Parks was shot dead instantly.
I heard my mom holler, look at my wife, Patty. Finally looked back. She was sitting slumped over with her top of her head gone.
I really didn't know what was happening at first. I didn't know what the sounds meant. And then when I realized that they were gunshots, I ran under the plane.
They shot the reporters on the ground, the congressmen. They come from the pickup, the dump truck from the other side and got off and stuck the gun to their heads, point blank, blew their brains out. They shot them up terrible.
The violence escalated quickly, claiming the lives of 4 more people, including NBC reporter Don Harris and Senator Ryan himself. Bob Brown, the cameraman, was also among those killed. Several others were gravely wounded in the chaos. During that time, in the gunfire, Tracy and her brother Dale were on the other plane, shielded from the immediate danger. Gerald was left in agonizing uncertainty about their fate. As the initial burst of gunfire ceased, the truck with the gunmen sped away, leaving behind a scene of devastation. But the horror wasn't over yet. In the smaller plane, a man who had pretended to be a defector drew a gun and began shooting at point-blank range. After fatally shooting one of the adults, he turned his gun towards Dale, Tracy's brother, threatening yet another innocent life. The shock and horror of these moments were overwhelming. Families that had sought freedom found themselves in a desperate struggle for survival. The airstrip, meant to be their gateway to safety, turned into a battleground. This brutal attack not only marked a tragic end for some, but also a harrowing escape for others, including Tracy and Dale, whose futures hung in the balance as the crisis unfolded around them. So after the horrific airport shooting, back in Jonestown, an even darker chapter unfolded. On the day of the attack, November 18th, at about 4:30 p.m., Jim Jones summoned all members of the People's Temple to the pavilion. He announced it was time for what he called their mock suicide drills to be enacted for real. The whole area was tightly secured by armed guards, setting a grim tone for what was about to occur.
Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity.
Jones had already ordered the mixture of cyanide with grape-flavored Kool-Aid, preparing a mass suicide. The followers were then forced to drink this deadly concoction. As this was happening, everything was being recorded on an audio tape, a tape that would later reveal the chilling events of that day.
Please, for God's sakes, let's get on with it. We've lived as no other people have lived and loved. We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it.
The tape lasted 45 minutes. During this recording, Jim Jones can be heard making wild claims about an army that was supposedly coming to torture them.
What's going to happen here in a matter of a few minutes is that one of those people on that plane is going to shoot the pilot. I know that. I didn't plan it, but I know it's going to happen. They're going to shoot that pilot, and down comes that plane into the jungle. And we had better not have any of our children left when it's over, because they'll parachute in here on us. I'm telling you just as plain as I know how to tell you. I've never lied to you. I never have lied to you. I know that's what's going to happen. That's what he intends to do. And he will do it. He'll do it.
His voice was forceful and manipulative, sowing fear among his followers. When some members, gripped by fear and doubt, protested and expressed their wish to leave, Jones flatly refused their pleas.
No, you're not going. You're not going. You're not going. I can't live that way. I cannot live that way. I've lived for all, and I'll die for all.
The scene quickly descended into chaos. Some of the temple members took the poison willingly, resigned to their fate, while others were forced to stand at gunpoint. As the recording continued, the sounds captured became increasingly difficult to listen to, filled with cries of despair and confusion.
Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. Don't be this way.
Oh, God.
I don't care how many screams you hear. I don't care how many anguished cries. Death is a million times preferable to 10 more days of this life.
I experienced and saw was absolute chaos and insanity.
Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony.
In the end, almost 1,000 people perished by drinking the cyanide-laced punch from an enormous vat. Among those who died were 304 children, a particularly harrowing fact. For the youngest, too small to drink from cups, cyanide was fed with syringes, forced into their mouths by their own parents under duress. The mass suicide at Jonestown was a tragedy that shook the world to its core when news of it broke. The enormity of the loss was staggering, but perhaps few felt the impact more deeply than Tracy Parks. Having lived all her 12 years within the confines of the People's Temple, she witnessed and survived the unimaginable. The aftermath of that day left a haunting silence in Jonestown, a place once filled with the voices of its members, now eerily quiet.
Americans were shot down by other Americans on the airstrip at Port Kaituma, Guyana. One of the dead, Representative Leo Ryan of California. They'd gone to investigate a cult called the People's Temple, headed by a man known as the Reverend Jim Jones, and they were killed by members of that cult. Appalling as that was, it did not prepare us for what was to follow.
What you're about to see almost defies description, and some of you may not want to watch it.
"910 died in the poison ritual of the People's Temple."
The word on everybody's lips was shades of Auschwitz.
The international community reeled in shock as the details emerged, struggling to understand how such a tragedy could have occurred. For Tracy and the other survivors, life would never be the same, forever marked by the events of November 18th, 1978. Now back at the airstrip, during the firing, Gerald saw his daughter Tracy running towards him. He tried to shield her from the horrific scene, but she was too quick. Tracy, along with her sister Brenda and a few other kids, found themselves alone in the jungle as Gerald and his mother remained behind on the airstrip. As dusk approached, their parents, fraught with worry, went back into the jungle, calling out for the children, but there was no answer.
Before night came, we went back to the jungle, started hollering for the kids, and no response. That's when my heart dropped, because I knew Guyana's one of the most dangerous jungles in the world.
The silence of the jungle was unnerving. As darkness enveloped them, Tracy, Brenda, and the 3 other children found a bent tree to climb, deciding it was safer to spend the night off the ground. The night was pitch black around them, and the distant sounds of gunshots pierced the silence, a stark reminder of the danger they were escaping. By November 19th, their second day in the jungle, the situation grew desperate. Tracy began to feel ill, a result of having nothing to eat or drink. Her condition worsened quickly. Brenda, being the oldest, tried to keep everyone moving.
I just remember thinking that if we don't get out of here today, we're not going to get out at all. I heard this music out here in the middle of a jungle. Who or where would even be playing it? Where would it be coming from?
My sister hit me. She goes, "Get up."
It was like it had snapped me back to reality, which allowed me to think. And as soon as that happened, that music turned to the sound of a generator.
I pretty much thought I was gonna die in there. We were hungry, we were thirsty, we had fevers.
She knew that Jim Jones' men might still be searching for them. As night fell again, a search helicopter with a big searchlight flew overhead. The children hid, fearing discovery. They knew they couldn't risk heading back towards Jonestown, where certain danger awaited.
The helicopters were actually flying over, we could hear them. And at nighttime, they were shining the lights down. We were hiding under banana leaves and whatever we could because we thought it was Jim Jones.
That night, the hardships of the jungle took a severe toll. Tracy got a high fever, and soon the others began to show signs of illness too. By November 20th, the third day, all 5 children were lying sick and exhausted on the jungle floor. Brenda, though weakened herself, knew she couldn't give up. Not with her little sister Tracy and the others depending on her.
I pretty much thought I was going to die in there because, you know.
In the jungle.
Yeah. We were hungry. We were thirsty. We had fevers. It was, pretty, all of us were sick.
In an incredible display of courage, Brenda led the group through the dense jungle. They hurried from tree to tree, pausing occasionally to listen for any sounds that might indicate danger, then moving again. After what felt like an eternity, they spotted a group of armed men patrolling alongside a river. For a moment, their hearts sank. But to their relief, these were not Jim Jones' men. They were U.S. rescuers.
The river was close to the airport. They stumbled up to the military guards there, who sent for Tracy's older brother.
He come running up, and I'll never forget the look on his face. It was like he had seen a ghost.
Tracy was taken to a small store nearby.
I just laid there and I thought, I've already been through hell. What else could happen really doesn't matter.
The reunion with their father, grandmother, and brother Dale was emotional and overwhelming. Tracy and Brenda, along with the other children, were finally safe.
Police come and told me that the kids had been found. For the first time I had something to smile about.
As they recovered and began to process their ordeal, they learned the full extent of the tragedy that had unfolded back in Jonestown. The news was devastating. The scale of the loss was unimaginable, and the details of the mass suicide haunted them. While they were relieved to be alive and back with their family, the shadow of what they had escaped and the memories of those they couldn't save lingered heavily. To sum up the whole story, Tracy's story, from the deceptive peace in Jonestown to the chaos at the airstrip and the desperate nights in the jungle, illustrates a powerful testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you in our next video.